Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world, possibly even good middle of the night based on some of the domain names I saw in the registration. My name is Todd Milbrand. I am the Distribution Sales Manager here at Sangoma. And today I'm going to take you guys through, not just guys and ladies, through security best practices as it relates to protecting your voice over IP solution, focusing on FreePBX and PBXact, but also talking about session border controllers as well. Most of you, since you are coming to us from our Grow Your Business with FreePBX and PBXact series, already know who we are, but just in case you're not familiar with Sangoma, we are the stewards of the open source Asterisk project as well as FreePBX. We have been in business for over 35 years. In that time, we have grown to a company with over $150 million in revenue. We're publicly traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. You can look us up. You can see we've been profitable for a very long time, and we continue to grow. We have over 350 or 400 employees spread out worldwide. We have 15 offices. There's not very many people at those offices currently, and I'm sure a lot of you are in the same boat working from home. I'm actually coming to you today from my dining room in sunny/tropical Buffalo, New York. So over the 35 plus years we've been in business, we've obviously acquired and sold solutions to lots of big names throughout the world, including a lot of our competitors. You may be looking at this and seeing Avaya or Mitel and going, wow, don't you compete with them? We do, but we also do offer them solutions within our portfolio. But the majority of our business is the SMB, right? So the one to couple hundred user sized organizations, and we offer everything from A to Z. Everything from voice and data cards that you can put into a server, which is where we got started 35 years ago, making those cards, so that you can interface with the PSTN or data networks, to VoIP gateways, software, appliances, phones, cloud services, SIP trunking, you name it, we have it. And today we're going to focus on PBXact and FreePBX and securing those two particular PBXs, which if you're not familiar in the difference between the two, you missed the previous part of the series where we discussed the difference. It's the same code base. PBXact is the commercially hardened version of FreePBX. If you go to your YouTube channel, you can watch what I personally consider an excellent webinar done by yours truly that highlights the differences between the two. And before we get into anything, I just want to point out some handy resources, things I'm going to refer back to, and items that you will need to know. FreePBX.org, that's where you can go to download FreePBX. Wiki.sangoma.com, this is where you can go to find various walkthrough articles, how to, and as it relates to FreePBX and PBXact, I've got a link here that you can find by searching through the wiki, but I've got a link here where you can go straight to taking a look at security best practices as it relates to those two phone systems. The Sangoma portal, which is where you can go to register as well as manage any of your PBXs as well as other devices from us, and training.sangoma.com. And everything on this site is free. Some of it, or everything on the slide, is free. You don't need to pay anything to get training online or to go through the wiki or freepbx.org. All of these are readily available to you. And today we're going to talk about securing yourself, right? Securing your organization, and specifically how opening up your network to voice over IP, whether it's people working remotely right now, which that has shot up significantly recently. Lots of people that have never worked from home are working from home. Organizations, probably such as yourself, have scrambled to make sure that you've got business continuity. And whether it's a converged network, separate networks, what have you, you have concerns about keeping your data safe, keeping your customers' data safe, keeping your employees' data safe. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And I want to start by just talking about how things have evolved, right? So back in the 80s, the 90s, even before that, when the internet was invented by Al Gore, everything was open, right? Everybody kind of trusted each other. It was universities and governmental organizations and research institutes. They were using modems to connect to each other, to get remote access as individuals. And shortly after that happened, as is, I guess, just a reflection on humanity, somebody very quickly said, "Oh, look at that! I can go in and break stuff, explore, maybe steal stuff." And so firewalls came about because of that, right? You needed to protect things on the edge of your network, protect those workstations or computers or shared resources. And a firewall, as far as what it meant from a data perspective, was to just say yes or no to traffic. Yes, you were allowed in. No, you were not allowed in. And if somebody wanted to do something with your phone lines, they had to physically get access to those phone lines, right? You had those analog lines from Verizon or AT&T or Bell Canada, depending, wherever you are. Somebody needed to actually hook up wires to be able to say listen in on things. And if they wanted to record things, you had to hook that up to a tape player. And starting in the 90s, these two networks and these two types of technologies started to converge with voice over IP. And so now you've got all sorts of traffic going through the firewall related to voice that firewall was never made for, right? It was not developed with the thought of, hey, voice and real-time communications and video and screen share and all these other collaboration type things, all this stuff is going to start going through here. It was specifically for, am I going to allow this in? Am I going to allow this out based on an IP address, based on other various different types of factors? And with that, just as when things were open on the internet and shortly thereafter, people started figuring out, hey, I can break things, I can hack things, I can do this. Same thing has been happening in VoIP environments now for the last 20 plus years. And a lot of folks, they think to themselves, well, I'm an SMB, I'm 5 people, I'm 10 people, I'm even 100 people. Why would anybody want to hack me? Well, why did anyone want to hack things back in the 80s when things were open? Because they can, because they're bored, because there's money to be made. Some people just want to see the world burn. And unfortunately, at your size, maybe 15 years ago, a 100-user company had 5 people working in an IT department. That same 100-user company now, I would say over 80% of the times when I'm brought in to talk to someone, that same 100-user company is either outsourced things or they have one IT person at best. And a lot of organizations that are smaller, it's not even an IT person or someone in charge of that. It's someone who is just managing those things because they happen to be more technical. I mean, I've even, you go to medical offices, it's the office manager who runs that, and they have access to Office 365, so they can do this or do that, but they don't. These folks are not. they're getting thrust into roles and aren't necessarily thinking about best practices as far as it relates to security. So a firewall, unfortunately, is not going to fully secure things when you need to send voice through it. Firewall is necessary. Firewall should not go anywhere. But just like other types of security, you've got various different layers, right? Just because Microsoft or Gmail or whoever you're using for email scans for viruses at the server level, doesn't mean you go, you know what, I don't need to have any sort of security on the desktops or laptops or other devices that's being taken care of over there. You still layer it. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about with SBCs, which is a missing critical component in that layer that people are not looking at. But right now we're going to focus on, you don't have an SBC there, and what do you do with the PBX? And so I've got some slides that I'm going to skip because I hate slides. I'm sure you guys do too. And I'm actually going to go into a system and start showing you guys some various different things. This is not going to be comprehensive. It is not going to cover everything. And one thing I forgot to mention that before I even go into that is we get a lot of questions on these security webinars, and they're always very, very, very specific, and there are a lot of them. So what I have done for this particular one is we have turned off questions, not because we don't want to answer them, but it's because, you know, the one I did this morning had less people, but probably about 75 questions came in. And a lot of it is very specific. A lot of it's almost sales engineering-ish. So what I'm going to recommend, you can go to Sangoma.com. You can chat with someone in sales immediately after this webinar. You can call if you're in North America. We'll start here. You can see we've got phone numbers for you to call, regardless of where you're located. And even though most people are working from home right now within our organization, as you can imagine, being what we make and who we are and what we do, we already had those plans in place. We have people working from home ready to answer those questions and help you out. And you can also go to the forums for FreePBX. That is also a great resource. Lots of people in there, always willing to help people out, take a look at things. So I'm going to pop into a PBXact. If you're primarily used to working with a FreePBX, you can see the colors are different, slightly different user interface, but it's familiar enough for you. And the first thing I want to discuss is going into system admin as far as securing your solution. A lot of this stuff, that link I was telling you about, FreePBX best practices, some of it's in here. There's plenty more on the wiki in the community forums that can guide you. Again, this is just an overview on things people tend to overlook. So first thing I'm going to start with here is provisioning protocols. Typically, you're going to want to have provisioning going over HTTPS, so it's secure. So there can be a username and password. You do not want folks attempting to make registrations and possibly getting registered to your system. Getting registered to your system can allow them to attempt tool fraud, get access to other parts of your network. So within sysadmin, I'm going to go down here to port management, and you can see we've got insecure, so regular HTTP ports, as well as secure. Not only do I recommend, obviously, that you use the secure ports, but I personally try not to use any of the default ports where possible. just because port scanners, things of that nature, people that may even be familiar with FreePBX and are specifically targeting you or targeting FreePBX systems know those defaults. And by using something else that can allow you to at least throw a wrench into things, right? It doesn't fully protect you, doesn't save you from anything. It's part of your security layers. If we go to HTTPS setup, this is where you can go in and load a certificate. You can see this particular system because this is a throwaway. I'm going to delete afterwards. I'm not secure. I'm sending this over the default port of 2001, which is also not secure. You're going to want to come in here, select the certificate, get it installed, do everything you need to do, and start going over, use the default 443, that port, as well as through it being HTTPS. And then lastly, here in sysadmin is where you can set up a VPN server. You can do this for supported devices like our phones, so that if you've got folks working remotely, those particular phones will have a VPN tunnel between their home and your PBX. You can also make it so that folks can download the OpenVPN client, and you can use the PBX as a VPN back into your network. And as you can see, this is a throwaway that I have not set very much up in, but we've got plenty of stuff on training.sangoma.com, the wiki and all that. If you want to go ahead and set that up, especially with what's going on, you can use your PBX for VPN connectivity back to your network for remote users. All right, so I'm going to come up here and search. I always use search because even if you've worked with FreePBX like I have, going back well over a decade, if you go over modules here, you always miss stuff, no matter, even though you know where it is. I always recommend use the search bar. You know what you're looking for, just use the search bar. Otherwise, I have found myself staring at this for 30, 45 seconds, maybe even a couple of minutes. So I try to make sure I always use the search. So within FreePBX, in PBXact, we do have a weak password detection, probably because I haven't done much for setting up the system. That's why there's nothing here. But you definitely want to periodically check this and make sure there's no 1234, password 1234, people's names, stuff like that. Another item I like to make sure folks change is with an EndPoint Manager, the defaults, especially if there's millions upon millions of FreePBX servers out there. It's the nature of it being around for 15, 16, 17 years at this point. It having the majority of what you need for free. So folks are gonna know that we like to set the admin password on a phone to 22222, and that helps you get into the phone web GUI. Come here, change the phone user password to something more secure, something you're gonna have to write down on a piece of paper or store somewhere, so that those things do not become a point where somebody can infiltrate. And we're not just worried about the outside world, right? Like, a lot of hacking is in person. A lot of hacking is social engineering, right? So businesses everywhere have guest networks, and that's supposed to keep you secure, keep folks that are not supposed to be on your network off of it. But maybe I'm paranoid. I don't trust that stuff. I've seen that stuff fail. I've seen people get access to other things. And if somebody is in the building had physical access to a phone or something, it's just you are better off that this is not the default. All right, and lastly, as it relates to protecting your phone system, we have a responsive firewall. I'll just rerun the wizard here real quick. And man, that's not a graphic you expect to see in your phone system, is it? That is a great graphic, though. And it lets you know that the smart firewall is enabled. So even though you have a firewall that is going to be protecting your overall business at the edge of your network, you're still going to want to enable this on your PBX. This will ensure that if somebody tries to gain access to something, it will automatically block them based on various different things that you may enable. Now, we have a product called Zulu, and when we were first developing it, I may have put my password into Zulu wrong 3 times within a minute. And since Zulu registers to our corporate PBXact, I may have blocked an entire IP address for about 20, 25 people, and everyone's phone stopped working. Luckily, I fixed that, or got somebody to fix it for us, and made sure to not do that. And we also did some things within Zulu to prevent somebody from doing that in the future. But because I'd put that password wrong incorrectly, even though I was a valid user, it blocked everything. So that blocked that IP. No phones can register. None of our tools would work that were tied to the phone system. So it really is powerful and is a great part of that layer. Now, I'm going to go back into my slides, and I'm going to skip over some of these. And we're going to go straight into why firewalls aren't secure enough. So you've done this layer, you have your firewall, but why is that not enough? Why do you need an additional layer of an SBC? As we discussed earlier, you want to keep your firewall. It's part of that layer, but it is not meant specifically for real-time communications. It is meant to just be binary, yes or no. Your IP is good, your IP is bad. VoIP traffic can have attacks buried deep into packets, and firewalls are not made to do deep packet. I mean, there is some deep packet inspection, but not to the level that's needed when you have voice over IP traffic constantly traversing your LAN over to your WAN and vice versa. It needs to be processed in real time, and most firewalls that will not only bog them down if they were to be given some of that capability, but SIP-aware firewalls. So you may have seen SIP ALG when you were playing around with something and wonder what that did. And if there's a little question mark next to it in the router or firewall, it'll tell you it helps voice over IP calls. It absolutely doesn't. It actually makes it harder for those calls to connect. It has NAT traversal issues. There's lots of audio problems and drop calls when you enable it. So this was the firewall industry's response to SIP, for lack of a better word, coming of age in the mid-2000s and having to support it. It was not a good implementation then. It has not done much as far as advancement since 2005, and it does not really make your firewall SIP aware. It makes your firewall SIP averse and drops calls and packets. And do not touch SIP ALG, not just with us, with any SIP trunk service, any SIP-based phone system. SIP ALG is not your friend. I don't know that it's your enemy, but it's definitely not your friend. Now, what are we trying to protect you from? You're already aware of all the various types of attacks that can happen to you just from a data or information internet type attack, right? You know that folks want your bank card number, your routing numbers, they want your customer data. Maybe, again, they're just the type of individual that wants to see the world burn. I'm going to introduce you to some specific attacks to voice over IP. Now, we want to protect you from all types of attacks, which is why the SBC is so important. But I think a lot of people don't realize that they can be attacked specifically to their phone systems, specifically to their voice networks. And the number one that we see is toll fraud. And why we see toll fraud is there are, for lack of a better term, third world countries out there where people have access to the internet, they have technical tools, technical abilities, but they live in an economy with not much money. And if I own a phone company in that country, most likely, because I'm smaller as far as country size, economy size, and I'm probably smaller for the country as a whole, I'm not going to have an agreement with Verizon that says, hey, any calls from your network to my network in my country, this is our agreed upon rate. So when those agreed upon rates are not there, it's essentially the wild, wild west. And I, as a phone company, can go, hey, Verizon, those 10,000 minutes, that's like $5 a minute. I'm going to need $50,000. So me as an operator, I can go to hackers and go, look, I'll give you 10% of whatever comes in from this traffic. All you need to do is figure out how to send some traffic to me. And that hacker can then go into a phone system and send tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of minutes, typically late at night so that people don't realize it. You get a bill that is astronomical. Your customer gets a bill that's astronomical. Maybe Verizon works with you and goes, look, you got to pay us something. We understand you were hacked. We understand this. We understand that. But it's on you for not having properly secured your solution. And then Verizon will also go, look, I'm not giving you $50,000. I'll give you $5,000. And maybe there's a loss. Maybe there's some write-off. But that's where it comes from. And I've seen it repeatedly over the decade and a half that I've been in this industry. It sucks for the customer. It sucks for everyone. But it is by far the biggest type of attack that we see. And that's, as you can see, attributed to $38.1 billion in losses. That's a huge number. Denial of service attacks. So people think denial of service. They think about going to a website and they cannot access it. That is true. That same denial of service attack, if it is pointed towards your IP address where your phone system is, what you can expect is that your phone system will not be able to handle it, especially if it is getting through the firewall. Your firewall might not be able to handle it. Your phones can go down. You can't access your tools. Just like I put in that incorrect password for Zulu and couldn't access certain tools like Zulu, those will go down. And it can cost you a whole bunch of money. And it can be it can paralyze you, and it can be just because somebody wanted to do it to you. Maybe you piss someone off. Maybe you just happen to have some open ports on the internet, and somebody that was bored wanted to do it. I don't try to understand why these folks do these things. I just try to understand what they're doing and how we can protect ourselves against them. So, do know that that is another type of attack, not just towards websites or big websites or, hey, I heard about that denial of service attack against Netflix that took them down for 15 minutes. That can happen to you as well and affect your phone system. And identity theft, that's one of the ones I was talking about before, as far as just in general, getting access to data, information, going over an internet connection. Your PBX can be a window into that. Not securing it properly, not going through a lot of those best practices we just overviewed, not having an SBC there. You may not have toll fraud, but that could be because they wanted to steal social security numbers off your employees' records, or they wanted to sniff traffic and see passwords that people were putting in on Facebook and other places. And then lastly, this is very specific eavesdropping. Again, earlier I was talking about people having to have physical access to the phone line. So a lot of SMBs will not concern themselves with this. And I guess it depends on your industry and your industry as it relates to the world. I have talked to quite a few manufacturers, for instance, where, here in North America, North America used to produce 95% of the world's widgets. And they are now the last company in North America making this widget. And all of their competitors happen to be in countries where intellectual property laws are laxly enforced at best. So they not only are trying to constantly protect their networks from all the other attacks we were talking about, but the PBX is super important as well, right? Because someone can get access to sniff out traffic, listen to it in real time, or even worse, record all of the phone calls on the phone system and offload them elsewhere in the middle of the night when no one's paying attention, to go through and listen to and try to gain competitive advantages as it relates to that industry. So do be aware that's not one of the bigger attacks as far as frequency, but depending on what you do, it is something you should concern yourself with. So how do we solve for all this, right? Well, first of all, we want to make sure we have our different layers of security. So we have our firewall. We do what we need to do on the PBX, but then we also want to put what's known as a session border controller right inside the network behind the firewall, right? So to allow voice traffic to traverse your firewall, you need to open up ports. And so if you're using SIP trunking, you're opening ports and thus opening yourself up to these types of attacks. If you have remote phones, you're opening up ports and thus opening yourself up to these attacks. And you're going to, even when you put a session border controller in here to manage that traffic and do the things a firewall cannot do with real-time communication, you're still going to want to do all those security best practices with your PBX. And remote workers, we have VPN. It is there. Lots of people are using it. I personally would not use it on a phone system I would implement. And here's the reason why. So VPN gives you a false sense of security, right? You've got this tunnel. It is secure. It definitely helps from a perspective of maybe you're worried about between here and your office or wherever the phone system is that somebody might eavesdrop on those calls. But what you're assuming here is everything else. You've got the phone VPN'd back. Maybe there's a laptop attached to it, and that laptop is utilizing that VPN to get resources that are within the walls of your organization or within the walls of wherever they are. And you're assuming that the person at home has a firewall or router or cable modem that's actively managed, is of good quality, and also that their laptop, other devices, their kids' phones, the iPad, the neighbor that doesn't pay for internet but somehow figured out a password and is on their Wi-Fi, that all of those things are secure and properly handled and managed. And when they're not, these phones, that laptop is giving folks a express toll road with no toll right to all of your network, your data, your phone system. When you put an SBC in, that SBC is able to, in real time, inspect data, inspect traffic, know what is good, know what is legit, and drop and block the data or packets or attempts that are not what they should be. Now, in a SIP trunking setup, we talked about the need for opening up the holes in your firewall and wanting to protect those holes before getting to the rest of your network. Another place where SBC comes into being useful beyond the security piece is it solves interoperating issues, right? So within especially the open source community we're in with FreePBX, PBXact, everybody just thinks SIP just works, it's all interoperable, and with the stuff we use and the tools we use, that for the most part is the case. But there are a lot of instances, whether it's a provider or even to go outside the scope of any of this, maybe you wanted to set up SIP trunks between a FreePBX and a ShoreTel system. Somebody bought another company, or just one of their locations has ShoreTel, and you want to do extension-to-extension dialing with them. ShoreTel was always terrible about their SIP implementations, and putting an SBC in would not only secure things here in this situation, but it would also normalize that traffic so devices can properly talk to each other. There's also some media transcoding as well. So if you're not familiar with what transcoding is, think of it like Google Translate, except if you've seen the videos where Google Translate happens in real time, one language to another, it's just one codec to another, right? So G711 to G722 or G729. So it's more than just security. You do get some additional benefits as well. With the big thing being finding mail-form packets, blocking suspicious traffic. You can also use TLS or SRTP to encrypt traffic. An SBC can also make you a lot more scalable. So if you're larger, or maybe even you have really extensive disaster recovery plans to keep your office up and running or your call center, SBCs not only can, again, provide security, they can do other things to ensure uptime and call availability and call delivery, as well as some DMF detection and generation. I know for myself over the years, I changed something on a particular system, maybe a new SIP trunk provider, I'm trying out a new phone, and go to call someone or go to put in something in an IVR, and for whatever reason, 7 or 1 or whatever the number is, it has a hard time being recognized on the other end. The SBC can normalize that, which, believe it or not, still happens, and it's still a frustration for people. So within our SBCs, we have the SMB SBC. These go from, can be purchased from 5 up to 30 session calls. If you get the 5, you can actually upgrade all the way up to the 30. If you need more than that, you're going to be looking at our Enterprise SBC. That particular device goes from 25 to 250, and you can update it in increments of 25. So you can start at 25, go all the way to 250. You can even get the enterprise version with up to 4 T1 ports, so that way you can converge networks into a singular device, use it as a gateway. And then we do have the NetBorder SBC, which is meant for carriers and very large organizations. It'll go up to 4,000 sessions. And the VM Enterprise doesn't need to go on a VM. You can put it on your own hardware device if needed, but it's software only, virtual machine ready. I thought I updated this, my apologies. It goes to 4,000 sessions. It's more than 1,000. And if you go back to our website and you go to products, network connectivity, go to session border controllers, what I would highly suggest is you go about halfway down, you download the free license, you then go to wiki.sangoma.com and you type in SBC VM. VM SBC. And there we go. Or just type in software SBC. You can then download the software. It is an ISO, so you can't put it on your laptop. It will overwrite Windows or Mac or whatever you have on there. Download this, take that license, apply it to the download, and then go to training.sangoma.com. If you have a portal login or you've ever logged into something with us, that same login is what gets you access here. We launched this, I'm going to say, about a year and a half ago. You can see there's also free PBX and other trainings, but start with the SBC Essentials and go along with it. You'll have access to the software. You'll have one that can allow 2 calls to traverse it. And if it works for you, you're comfortable with it, and you want to either get an appliance or upgrade the one that you've downloaded, we can absolutely do that. And if you have any questions about any of this stuff, like I said, go back to our site. We've got our chat. We have a sales email. And we have phone calls as well. And I kind of want to end this with a, almost like it's a telethon, right? Agents are standing by, waiting for your call. Please call in. But with that, I understand you guys are going to have questions based on previous ones. I know they're very specific, and we want to make sure they get answered. So use email, use our forums, use chat, whatever works best for you. Reach out, and we will get those answered for you. So with that, I want to conclude and say thank you for joining us today. I do hope everyone is doing well. I also hope that you enjoyed this. Till the next time we do one of these, you guys have a great rest of your day.